Our Bible readings today focus on words. James gives a general lesson about being careful with the words we use. He really has some tough things to say about our tongues, about the words that we use, and the things that we say. And Jesus asks us about the words we use to declare our faith in Him. Who do we say that Jesus is? These readings remind us of the importance of words. We remember that very first act of the creation of the world happened when God spoke a word. And we know that words can create. They create images, they can create an atmosphere, they can create something beyond the physical act of making sound with a vibrating vocal cord, forming words with our lips, and hearing words with our ears. But even before a word is formed on our lips, it begins with an idea or a thought, something in our head or in our heart. Through a complex process, the idea gets transmitted from our brains to the muscles of our mouths, and the word becomes spoken. And that is the moment when a thought comes to life. It takes on a power that it didn't have back in our brain. James tells us that we who are made in the image of God have an ability that the rest of nature does not possess. The water coming out of a spring cannot be both fresh and brackish. A fig tree can't produce olives. A grapevine can't produce figs. Salt water cannot produce fresh. Well, yes, I know that humans have developed techniques to desalinate water, to produce fresh water from salt. But the water in the ocean itself, or in the Dead Sea, or in the Great Salt Lake, cannot turn fresh on its own. Other animals can communicate with sounds and signs, but humans are more complex. Out of our mouths can come words that help or heal, words that wound or destroy, good or evil. They can bless or they can curse. We can say, I love you, or our words can say, you are stupid. One mouth, two pathways. It hardly seems fair because our tongues are only a very small part of our body. But we should not let its size fool us. Things small in size can be mighty in influence. For instance, James says, the bit that goes into the mouth of a horse is very small compared to the size of the horse. But how do you guide the horse? By letting it know which way to go through the reins connected to that small bit in its mouth. The bit determines the pathway. Or, James says, consider a boat. From the smallest dinghy with an outboard motor to the largest aircraft carrier, no matter what the size, the boat is directed by its rudder, which is small in comparison to the size of the rest of the boat. But it is the rudder that determines the pathway of the boat. So too with our tongues, James says. The tongue may be small compared to our body as a whole, but the words that come out of our mouth determine the path that we take. It can be a pathway of building up or tearing down, a pathway of wounding or healing, of tearing or sowing, of illumination or confusion. We may say sticks and stones may break our bones, but words can never hurt me. Well, maybe not physically, but words have an enormous power to wound in ways which may not be visible on the outside, but which can last us a lifetime. With a word, we create a reaction, an atmosphere, but we can only create with the material we have, and that material is what is in our heads and in our hearts. The Talmud is a collection of doctrines and laws that have been compiled and written before the 8th century AD by ancient Jewish teachers. One of the teachings from the Talmud is, we do not see things as they are. We see things as we are. If we are loving, we see love. If we are confused, we see confusion. If we are angry, we see others as attacking us. If we lack self-confidence, we see another's words saying we do not have any talent. When that is how we are, that is not only how we see the world, it's also how we hear the words that others speak. It's also the way in which we talk. Our words bubble forth from a spring of emotions and ideas that live within us. They reveal more about who we are than just what we're talking about. So, if you are in a position of authority, such as teaching or preaching, then James says to watch out. You have taken on a position of prestige, and you must live up to a higher standard. Now, James says we won't always get it right. We all make mistakes. But the words we use are very important, and we try not to make mistakes with them. So it is important to think about what we say before we say it. Jesus also wants us to pay attention to what comes out of our mouth, especially when it comes to telling others what we believe about him. Who does everyone say I am? Jesus asked the disciples. And who do you say that I am? He's asking them what they're thinking and what they're talking about. Not only what do you believe, but also what are you telling? What are you sharing with other people? Who do you say that I am? Jesus is asking us today. We answer with our lives and the things we do, and we answer with our words. The answer comes out of what we put into our hearts and heads, and the decisions we make about how we are going to live. To get an idea about how we live our lives, there are some things we can look at. We can check our calendar. How do we spend our time? We can look at our checkbook. How do we spend our money? Or we can listen to ourselves talk. What do we say? And how do we say it? Looking at these things gives us an idea about what we truly believe and where our hearts are. Why is this important? Well, we know that nowadays, not everyone has heard of Jesus, or they haven't heard of who Jesus really is. Maybe the only experience they have had has been through churches like Westboro Baptist in Topeka, Kansas, the group that protests at military funerals. Maybe they listen to the things that church is saying and that church is saying and thinks that it is speaking for all Christians. Wouldn't you rather they heard a different Christian message? Wouldn't you rather they know the truth about what Jesus says and what he does and who he is? Who do you say that I am? The answer we give through the words we say and the way we live may be the only witness to tell people, other people, who Jesus is. So let us choose our words carefully, and may our hearts be filled with God's goodness and love, peace, and grace, so that our words will be too. To God be the glory forever. Amen.